Two cops thought they were making a routine arrest at 2:47 a.m. They kicked down the door of a black woman's house, but they had no idea she was the most feared agent in the FBI. What happened next left the entire precinct shaking, eyes fire. They thought she was just another black woman living alone in the suburbs. But at 2:47 a.m., when the officers kicked down her door, they didn't just arrest anyone. They arrested the one woman the FBI's most wanted fear the most. If this story shocks you, don't forget to like and subscribe to Gentle Words, because this night was only the beginning. The rain fell hard that night. Heavy drops rolled off the roofs like tears, making the quiet neighborhood sound like a distant battlefield. Maya Carter sat alone in her living room, wearing gray sweatpants and an old army t-shirt. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, glasses sliding down her nose as she flipped through the worn-out pages of a book. To anyone passing by, she looked like a tired woman trying to end a long day in peace. But nothing about Maya Carter was ordinary. The world didn't know her name, but behind closed doors of the nation's most secure facilities, her name carried weight. Special Agent Maya Carter, Level 1 Clearance, FBI Shadow Division. The woman criminals feared before they ever saw her face. The woman who had infiltrated terrorist rings, rescued kidnapped diplomats, and shut down entire trafficking empires with nothing more than a badge and sheer willpower. And yet, tonight, she just wanted a cup of tea in silence. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. The neighborhood was asleep, but then, thud, 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 the sound rattled the front door. Not polite knocking, a pounding, forceful, controlled. Maya's body straightened instantly. Instincts, not fear. She slid her hand under the cushion where she always kept her Glock 19, the matte metal cold against her skin. Her heart didn't race. It slowed, trained breathing, controlled reaction. Outside, two uniformed officers stood in the rain, their squad car lights flashing faint red and blue across the quiet street. Their names were Officer Jake Daniels and Officer Cole Harris, both young, ambitious, and about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. They'd received a 911 tip claiming suspicious activity at 219 West Hill Drive. It sounded routine. A black woman, alone, possible drugs in the house. They didn't double-check the source. They didn't ask for a warrant. They just came charging, adrenaline rushing like they were about to be heroes. "Ma'am, open up." Jake banged on the door again. "This is the police." Maya approached quietly, staying out of direct line with the door. Her voice came calm and clear. "Do you have a warrant? Open the door, or we'll break it down." Cole shouted, gripping his flashlight tighter. Rain dripped off the brim of his cap. Maya exhaled slowly. She'd faced armed cartels, corrupt politicians, assassins, but this was worse in its own way. Because this wasn't about danger. It was about assumption. She unlocked the door and opened it only a few inches. Her brown eyes met theirs through the gap. "You're making a mistake," Jake smirked. "We'll see about that. Step aside." Without waiting, they forced their way in, boots muddying her wooden floor. One officer grabbed her wrist roughly. "Hands behind your back," Jake barked. "You're under arrest for suspected narcotics trafficking." Maya could have ended this in seconds. Disarm one, spin the other, cuffs on them. But she didn't. She wanted to see how far their ignorance would take them. She turned, hands behind her back. Cold steel cuffs snapped onto her wrists. "You're making the worst arrest of your career," she said softly, almost like a warning. Cole laughed. "Yeah, we'll let the judge decide." As they dragged her outside into the pouring rain, neighbors peeked from their windows. Curtains moved. A porch light flickered on. People saw the flashing red and blue lights. A black woman in handcuffs. They whispered what they wanted to believe. None of them saw the FBI metal case under her living room floor. None of them saw the file labeled, "Classified, Shadow Operations." The back seat of the squad car was cold. The rain beat against the roof like a ticking clock. Maya sat upright, her gaze fixed forward. No begging, no panic, just silence. In the front seat, the officers laughed. "This is it, man," Jake whispered. "Promotion, guaranteed." They didn't know that the moment her fingerprints entered the precinct system, something else was happening 800 miles away. In Washington, D.C., deep inside the FBI command center, a red alert blinked across every secure terminal. Clearance breach. Level 1 agent detained. Protocol shadow initiated. Agent Michael Roberts, her old partner, was in his office when the alert went off. He stared at the screen, eyes wide. "Oh no. Who the hell touched Maya Carter? Within minutes, an encrypted call went out. Black SUVs roared to life. A helicopter lifted off the helipad. Where is she? A senior director barked. Local precinct, West Hill County. Get her, now, .. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Maya sat alone in a holding cell. Concrete walls, one flickering light overhead, the sound of officers laughing somewhere down the hall. She'd been in cells before, but never on this side. She wasn't angry, she was used to being misjudged before she ever opened her mouth. But she was also tired. Tired of having to prove herself in a country where her skin came before her name. She tilted her head back, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "Let's see how long it takes them." Cole walked by, peeking through the bars. "You don't look so tough now, huh?" She opened her eyes slowly. Calm, controlled. "You should really check my ID again," she said. He laughed. "Yeah, sure, maybe after my coffee." But at that exact moment, the computer at the front desk made a noise neither of them had ever heard before. A high-pitched, continuous beep. The screen flashed red. Jake?" Cole called out. "Something's happening." Jake leaned over the monitor. On the screen were words neither officer expected. "FBI, National Security Alert. Do not detain. Contact HQ immediately." "Is this some kind of joke?" Jake whispered. Before they could process it, a deafening roar filled the night. Black SUVs slid to a stop outside the precinct, tires splashing water. The doors opened, and armed tactical agents stepped out in perfect formation. At the front of the group was Agent Roberts, wearing a black trench coat, face like carved stone. He walked through the precinct doors without knocking. His badge hit the front desk like a thunderclap. "Where is she?" Every officer froze. Cole stammered, "She's, holding cell 3. Roberts didn't waste a second. He walked to the cell, opened it himself, and unclipped the cuffs with a swift click. "You okay, Maya?" he asked. "Peachy," she said dryly, rubbing her wrists. "They didn't even Mirandize me." Roberts turned, his eyes locking on Jake and Cole. "Do you have any idea who you just arrested?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You two just cuffed the FBI's top field agent. The one cartels have nightmares about." Their faces went pale. Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. "She's a level 1 clearance agent," Roberts continued. "And you treated her like a suspect because of what? An anonymous call? Her skin?" The entire room was silent. The rain outside roared louder than their breaths. Maya stepped out of the cell, her presence suddenly feeling 10 feet tall. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Power like hers didn't need volume. She walked past them slowly. "You didn't arrest me," she said softly. "You exposed yourselves. .. Outside, the tactical team surrounded her like she was royalty. The black SUVs gleamed under the rain. Roberts walked beside her. "You want to press charges?" he asked quietly. Maya shook her head. "No, I want them to remember this night every time they look at someone like me." As the SUVs drove away, Jake and Cole stood in the doorway, drenched in shame. They'd thought they were arresting a suspect. Instead, they'd cuffed the very woman criminals feared most. Inside the car, Maya looked out the window at the falling rain. Her reflection stared back at her, strong, calm, and unbroken. She had spent her entire life fighting the world's evil, but tonight was a reminder. Sometimes, the fight isn't overseas. Sometimes, it's right at your front door. The black SUV sliced through the rain-soaked highway like a shadow. Inside, the silence was deafening. No sirens, no chatter, just the low hum of the engine and the storm outside. Maya sat in the back seat, hands resting on her lap. Her wrists still bore faint red marks from the handcuffs, marks that shouldn't have been there. She stared out the tinted window, watching streetlights blur past like fading memories. Agent Michael Roberts sat across from her. He'd known Maya for 10 years. He'd seen her break cartels, walk through burning buildings, talk hostages out of pulling triggers. But tonight, she looked different, quiet, distant, like a storm had passed through her chest and left behind ashes. "They're going to be suspended," Roberts finally said, voice low. "I don't care about them," Maya whispered. He frowned. "Then what's eating at you?" She turned to him slowly. Her eyes weren't angry, they were tired. "I can take down armed men with bombs strapped to their chests, Mike. I've stared death in the face more times than I can count. But tonight, they didn't even see me. Not the agent, not the woman who's bled for this country. Just a black face in a nice house." Her voice cracked for the first time. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shatter. Robert swallowed hard. There wasn't a tactical plan for this kind of wound. Back at the FBI headquarters, the storm outside matched the storm brewing inside. A room full of high-ranking officials sat around a long table. Their faces were serious, but Maya could tell the difference between concern and fear. This wasn't about her feelings. It was about liability, press, politics. Maya, what happened tonight was unacceptable, Director Samuels began. We're initiating a full internal investigation. The local department is already under review. She folded her arms. And what happens after that? A couple of apologies? A diversity seminar? A few people shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to seeing her speak like this. Usually, she was the unshakable one. The one who never raised her voice, never showed emotion. But tonight, the unbreakable woman had a crack in her armor. Maya, the director said carefully, we will make this right. She let out a bitter laugh. You can't make it right. You can't undo the look in their eyes when they saw me, like I was dangerous before they even spoke to me. Her words hung in the air like smoke. No one dared interrupt. She stood, straightening her jacket, her presence filling the room. I've taken bullets for this badge. I've buried friends for it. And still, it couldn't stop them from seeing me as a suspect first. Then she walked out, her boots echoing down the hallway. Each step sounded like a heartbeat. The elevator doors opened to the rooftop of the building. The storm had calmed to a soft drizzle. Maya stood under the night sky, hands in her coat pockets, looking at the city lights. She didn't cry, she'd forgotten how, but deep inside, a knot twisted in her chest. All the years of fighting, enemies overseas, criminals on American soil, and yet, this was the battle she'd never truly escaped. Being unseen in the country she'd sworn to protect. Footsteps approached softly. It was Robert's. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside her, the rain tapping gently on both their shoulders. You know, he said quietly, when we were in Mexico City and you dragged me out of that warehouse, I thought, she's the strongest damn person I've ever met. She gave a small, tired smile. I'm not strong, Mike. I just don't get the luxury of falling apart. That line hung heavy in the rain. Meanwhile, across town, Jake and Cole sat in the chief's office. Their uniforms soaked in shame. They had been stripped of their badges pending investigation. They'd watched the news reports. Her face was everywhere now. Top FBI agent wrongfully arrested. They hadn't arrested a stranger. They had cuffed a hero. Cole rubbed his face with shaking hands. We didn't even ask questions, Jake. Jake stared at the floor. We just saw her and assumed. The chief didn't yell. He didn't have to. You didn't just fail as officers. You failed as men, as human beings. Back on the rooftop, Maya pulled out a small, folded photograph from her pocket. It was old and faded, a picture of her father in uniform. He had been a police officer, too. I grew up believing in the badge, she said softly. I believed it would protect people like me. But it never did. My father was stopped in his own neighborhood once. Same thing, wrong place, wrong skin. And now it's me. Roberts looked at the photograph, then at her. But you are the badge now. Stronger than anyone wearing it. Maya exhaled, the cold night air mixing with her breath like smoke. That's the problem, Mike. I shouldn't have to be invincible to be treated like a person. The following morning, the sun rose slowly over the city. It was soft, golden. A quiet contrast to the storm of the night before. Maya stood in front of the mirror in her office. She buttoned up her black FBI jacket with steady hands. The world would see her as a symbol. Some as a hero, some as a headline, but inside, she was just a woman tired of fighting battles she didn't start. But she wasn't giving up. She straightened her shoulders, picked up her badge, and whispered to herself, they will see me. Ending. Emotional subscribe motive. And so, the woman they arrested walked back into the world not as a victim, but as a storm. Because sometimes the most powerful battles aren't fought with guns, but with dignity. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Gentle Words, because stories like Maya's deserve to be heard. Fly this chopper and I'll marry you. The rooftop fell silent after her words. Maya Turner, the youngest, richest aviation CEO in the city, stood there with a cruel smile on her face. looking down at a barefoot black man who smelled of dust and rain. Everyone laughed because they thought it was a joke. A homeless man? Flying her helicopter? Marry him? Impossible. But when his eyes slowly lifted to meet hers, the laughter began to fade. There was no fear in those eyes, only a quiet fire. A fire that told them this wasn't the first time his hands had touched a chopper. And this wouldn't end the way they expected. Fly this chopper and I'll marry you. The rooftop went silent after those words left Maya Turner's lips. The wind danced around the helipad, carrying her challenge like a spark thrown into a crowd soaked in gasoline. Laughter erupted, loud, sharp, cruel, as eyes turned toward the man standing at the edge of the platform. He wore no expensive suit, no shiny watch, no polished shoes. Just worn-out boots with a broken sole, a jacket frayed at the edges, and skin tanned by the sun of too many days spent outside. A duffel bag slung over his shoulder looked like it held his whole world. He stood still, silent, as the powerful laughed at him. Maya tilted her chin up, the late afternoon sun reflecting off the diamonds in her ears like a crown of light, as if she ruled the sky beneath her. She had everything: beauty, wealth, power, and to her, this moment was entertainment. Come on, she added with a sharp smirk, if you can fly this helicopter right now, in front of all of us, I'll marry you. No prenup, no questions asked. The crowd roared again, some clapping mockingly. To them, the challenge was a joke. To her, it was a performance. To him, it was something else. Elijah Cole did not flinch. He didn't look down, didn't shuffle his feet. His eyes slowly rose to meet hers, dark brown, steady, filled not with humiliation, but with something far more dangerous: quiet confidence. Maya noticed it for half a second, and something flickered inside her chest. But she buried it quickly beneath a wall of arrogance. She crossed her arms, her tailored black suit hugging her like armor. What's the matter? She teased. Scared? He didn't answer. Instead, his lips curled just slightly, not enough to be called a smile, but enough to unsettle her. I'll fly it, he said finally, his voice low and steady, carrying through the wind like a promise. The laughter around them turned into a murmur. Some whispered to each other, amused. Is he serious? He's out of his mind. He doesn't even look like he can afford a bus ticket. Maya chuckled under her breath. Oh really? She mocked. Do you even know what a cyclic or a collective is? No response, just the same steady gaze. Fine then, she said louder, turning so her board members could hear. If he crashes, which he will, he leaves my property and never shows his face here again. Deal? Elijah nodded. Deal. Security guards looked uncertain, glancing at each other for permission. This wasn't supposed to happen, but Maya raised her hand, signaling to let him through. She wanted to see him fall. She wanted to see reality crush whatever fantasy he carried in his tired bones. The crowd parted slowly as Elijah walked toward the gleaming black helicopter, a Turner Aviation HX-9, the pride of her company. Its polished surface reflected the blue of the sky, its rotor blades waiting like a sleeping beast. Elijah placed his palm against the cold metal, and for the first time, something shifted. Not in the machine, not in the air, in him. No one there knew who he really was. No one knew that before he became the man who slept on benches, he had been Captain Elijah Cole, one of the most skilled helicopter pilots the Air Force had ever seen. No one knew the medals tucked away in a storage box he no longer had the key to. No one knew the firestorm of his past, the missions, the crash, the loss. They saw a homeless man. What they didn't see was a warrior with wings carved into his soul. Maya leaned against the railing, amused. Well, Captain Nobody, she whispered, show us what you've got. Elijah climbed into the cockpit like a man coming home. His hands moved without hesitation. Switches, gauges, levers. It was muscle memory, the kind of familiarity that only came from years of living in the sky. A few board members frowned, confused. One of the engineers tilted his head. He knows the startup sequence, he whispered to another. That's not random, he's doing it exactly right. Maya heard them, but she shook her head, refusing to believe it. Then came the sound, deep, rhythmic, powerful. The rotor blades came alive, slicing through the air like the heartbeat of a giant. The wind whipped through the rooftop, catching dresses and suits, blowing Maya's hair loose from its perfect bun. Elijah sat with his spine straight, eyes focused, hands steady. The chopper began to lift. 1 foot, 2, then it hovered smoothly, as if weightless. The crowd gasped. Maya's smirk faltered for the first time. She took a step forward, gripping the railing, unable to look away. Elijah tilted the nose slightly forward, rotated left, then right, perfectly controlled maneuvers. This wasn't luck, this wasn't guessing, this was mastery. The same people who had laughed seconds ago now stood silent, their eyes wide, their breath caught in their throats. The engineer whispered, "This guy's good. I mean, really good." For Maya Turner, the world's most confident woman, something unfamiliar crawled up her spine, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Unease. Elijah rose higher, the city sprawling beneath him like a map. And for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. The air didn't care that he had slept under bridges. The wind didn't care about bank accounts. Up here, he was who he had always been, a pilot. A man of the sky. He spun the helicopter in a tight circle, then leveled it with the kind of precision only combat pilots mastered. He wasn't just proving a point, he was reclaiming a piece of himself. Below, Maya stared, her mouth slightly open. She tried to laugh again, but the sound never made it past her lips. The man she had mocked was flying her company's most advanced chopper better than most of her pilots. When he finally brought the helicopter down, it wasn't with a crash, or a stumble, or fear. It was with elegance, like a dancer bowing after a flawless performance. The rotor slowed, the noise faded, and a strange stillness settled on the rooftop. Elijah opened the door and stepped out calmly, brushing a streak of dust from his jacket. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight at her. "You said if I fly it, you'll marry me," he said, voice even, gaze unbroken. The board members shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with something she couldn't explain. Who are you?" she asked finally, trying to mask the tremor in her voice with arrogance. Elijah tilted his head. "No one," he said simply, and began walking past her. For a second, she could have let him go. She could have laughed, thrown the whole thing away as a game. But something inside her wouldn't let her. Maybe it was the way he touched that machine like it was a living thing. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not like she was powerful, not like she was untouchable, but like he saw straight through her walls. She spun around. "Wait," she called out, and her own voice surprised her. He stopped, his back still to her. "Who taught you to fly like that?" she demanded. He didn't turn around. "Life," he said softly. The wind carried his words, and they wrapped around her like a puzzle she suddenly wanted to solve. Her assistant approached nervously. "Ma'am, we should call security. This man is trespassing." But Maya didn't move. Her gaze stayed on Elijah as he slowly walked toward the stairwell leading back down to the streets. The crowd began to disperse, but the image of that flight clung to them like smoke after a fire. In that moment, Maya Turner, the woman who believed money controlled everything, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to know. As Elijah disappeared into the stairwell, she whispered to herself, "Who are you?" She didn't know that the answer to that question would unravel everything she thought she knew about power, love, and pain. The night after the rooftop challenge, Maya Turner lay awake in her penthouse suite, surrounded by walls of glass and silence. The city lights glittered beneath her like stars that had fallen from the sky, but for the first time, they didn't give her comfort. She had built her life on control, power, and perfection, and yet one man, a stranger from the streets, had shaken the ground beneath her. The way he touched that helicopter, the way he looked at her without fear, the way he said, "life," like the word itself carried a war inside it, it haunted her. She sat up, pushing away her silk sheets, walked barefoot to the window, and pressed her hand against the cold glass. "Who are you, Elijah Cole?" she whispered into the night. The next morning, she told herself she'd forget it, that the incident was just a strange story to tell at cocktail parties. But when she walked into the Turner aviation hangar, she saw something that stopped her breath. Elijah was there, standing near the same helicopter, wearing the same worn-out jacket, but this time not as an intruder. The head engineer was talking to him, no, listening to him, like a student before a teacher. "Morning," Maya said sharply, hiding her surprise beneath her usual armor. The engineer turned quickly, nervous. "Ma'am, this man, I know who he is," she interrupted, her voice clipped. She didn't, not really. But she wasn't going to admit that. Elijah didn't look at her right away. He was tracing the edge of the rotor blade gently, as if the machine was something fragile and alive. Then he finally turned, meeting her eyes with that same steady gaze that made her heartbeat stumble. "I didn't break any rules," he said calmly. "Your security guard let me in. Because you impressed them," she replied before she could stop herself. "People like to watch a good show." He tilted his head slightly. "Was it just a show?" Her breath caught for a moment, but she brushed it off with a small scoff. "You got lucky, that's all." But luck didn't explain the way her engineers looked at him with respect. It didn't explain why a man with no money, no address, and no family could talk about turbine dynamics like he wrote the manual himself. When the head engineer quietly handed her a file showing how Elijah had corrected one of their test blueprints overnight, a mistake even their senior pilots had missed, she realized this wasn't just some drifter. "You have no idea who he is, do you?" the engineer whispered to her later. And for once, Maya didn't. Hours passed, and curiosity became an ache she couldn't ignore. She called one of her people, a private investigator she'd used before. "I need everything on Elijah Cole," she said. Everything. When the file came in later that night, she sat at her desk, staring at the manila folder like it held a secret she wasn't ready to know. She opened it slowly, and what she saw burned through every wall she'd built around her heart. Captain Elijah Cole, decorated Air Force pilot, 2 distinguished flying cross medals, 9 rescue operations, over 3,000 flight hours. But then the pages turned darker. A mission in Kandahar, a chopper under fire. He flew back into a combat zone after everyone told him it was suicide, to save a trapped unit. He did it, he saved them, but on the way out, the helicopter took a hit. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Mark Harris, his best friend, didn't make it. Elijah survived, barely. The Air Force called him a hero. The newspapers called him a miracle. But Elijah called himself one thing only: guilty. He left the service 2 years later. Couldn't fly, couldn't breathe inside a home without seeing fire. He lost everything. His house, his medals, his will to belong. That's how the sky's finest became a man sleeping on park benches. Maya stared at the black and white photo of Elijah in uniform. The man who had stood barefoot on her rooftop had once stood before the world as a hero. Her throat tightened. Shame burned through her. She had mocked him, humiliated him in front of everyone, called him worthless, and all this time, he had carried a weight she couldn't even imagine. The next day, she walked to the hangar again. This time, not as a CEO, as a woman with questions. Elijah was sitting near the chopper, his back against the wall, eyes distant like they were fixed on something no one else could see. "I know," she said softly. He looked up slowly. "You know what? About Kandahar?" she whispered. He froze, the air between them thickening like a storm cloud. "You shouldn't have dug into my life," he said, his voice low. "That's all I have left. I had to," she admitted, her voice shaking. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." For the first time, something cracked in Elijah's eyes. Pain. Deep, old pain. "You shouldn't," he said flatly. "I'm not your kind of story." But she took a step closer. "Maybe you're exactly the kind of story I need." Her words hung in the air like a confession neither of them expected. Elijah stood up, taller than she remembered, the shadow of a soldier still in his posture. "Why does it matter to you?" he asked. "You're a CEO. I'm nothing." "You're not nothing," she said fiercely, surprising even herself. "You're the only person I've seen make that machine come alive like it was breathing. You're the only one who looked at me like..." She trailed off. Like what? Like she wasn't untouchable, like she was just a woman. Elijah laughed bitterly. "Machines don't care who you are. They don't care about money or titles. They only care if your hands are steady when the world is on fire." Maya took another step closer. "Then teach me," she whispered. "Show me what it's like to see the world from up there, the way you do." He stared at her for a long time, and for the first time in years, someone's eyes reached into the part of him he had locked away. Against every wall he'd built, against every reason to walk away, he finally nodded. "One flight," he said. "That's all." The following dawn, the two of them stood on the helipad as the first light brushed the city in gold. Elijah walked her through the controls with the patience of a man who remembered teaching rookies how to survive. "This isn't just a machine," he said softly. "It's a promise. When you're up there, everything that matters is the wind, the sky, and your heartbeat. Nothing else." She listened, not as a student, but as someone who wanted to understand him. When the rotors began to spin, Maya's heart pounded. He sat beside her, steady, calm, like the world couldn't touch him here. "Breathe," he said. She did. "Now, lift." The helicopter began to rise, slowly, smoothly, and for the first time in her life, Maya Turner, the woman who had built empires, felt weightless. She let out a soft gasp. The city fell away beneath them like a dream. "You feel that?" Elijah said, and for the first time, there was something soft in his voice. "That's freedom." She turned to look at him, but he was staring out the window, a faint, haunted smile on his face. She saw it then. This was where he belonged. Not on the ground, not in the shadows, but in the sky. When they landed, neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy with something new, understanding. She turned to him finally. "Why did you stop flying?" He didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, "Because the last time I flew, the person sitting next to me didn't make it home." She felt her throat tighten. "It wasn't your fault." His eyes hardened. "You weren't there." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "But I'm here now." Something in Elijah's chest cracked then. The walls, the guilt, the silence. "Do you know what it's like?" he whispered. "To have the thing you love the most turn into the thing that haunts you." Maya's eyes glistened. "Yes," she said softly. "I've built everything I have on control because I was terrified of losing everything again. But maybe," she paused, swallowing hard, "maybe the only way to stop being haunted is to start living again." The sun dipped lower, painting the helipad in orange and gold. Elijah looked at her, really looked at her, not the CEO, not the woman who mocked him, but the woman who saw him. For years, he had carried his guilt like chains. For years, she had hidden behind her power like armor. But in that moment, two broken souls saw the sky in each other's eyes. He stepped forward, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. "You still owe me something," he said quietly, and her heart skipped. "What?" she whispered. "You said if I fly it," he began. She laughed softly, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "I said I'd marry you." "Yeah," he said, his voice low, warm, aching. "But I don't need that." He looked at her like the sky itself. "I just need someone who believes I can fly again." Her hand trembled as she reached up, touching his face gently. "The way you touch something fragile you don't want to break." "Then fly, Elijah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Fly with me." The wind picked up, brushing through their hair, lifting the silence into something holy. Two people, one who lost everything in the sky, one who thought she owned the sky, standing on the edge of something real. That night, as the city lights flickered below and the helicopter's rotor slowly came to rest, Maya and Elijah stood together on the rooftop, not as a CEO and a homeless man, but as two souls finding their way back to the light. He didn't ask her for her world. She didn't ask him to forget his pain. They simply stood, and for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Right finger if this story touched your heart. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Gentle Words, where every story reminds us that behind every scar, there's a sky waiting to be flown again.
People laughed when a black waiter rushed to help a trembling old man who couldn't even hear his own cries. But when that waiter began speaking through his hands, in a language only silence understands, the entire restaurant froze. No one knew the man he saved was the deaf father of a billionaire. And no one expected what would happen next, when the billionaire arrived, and learned the truth. Speech balloon. Before we begin, if stories about human kindness, miracles, and unexpected heroes touch your heart, then please, like this video right now and subscribe to Gentle Words, for more true and emotional stories that remind us what being human really means. The lunch rush at L'Amour, a high-end restaurant tucked in the heart of New York, was always chaos wrapped in perfection. The waiters glided like dancers, each movement rehearsed, each smile polished. Silver cutlery shimmered under the golden lights, and expensive perfumes hung thick in the air. It was the kind of place where people didn't just eat, they displayed their power. But among the white uniforms and polished accents, there was Jamal. A black waiter, tall, quiet, with eyes that carried stories most people never asked to hear. To many of the rich guests, he was invisible. Just another shadow serving food and collecting plates. But inside that calm silence, Jamal carried something extraordinary, a past no one knew, a gift no one had seen yet. That afternoon, a new face entered the restaurant, an elderly man with trembling hands and kind eyes. He wore an old brown coat, a bit torn at the sleeves, and his hearing aid glinted faintly under the chandelier. He moved slowly, confused, as if the world around him was louder than he could bear. "Sir, may I help you?" the hostess asked politely. The old man didn't respond. His eyes darted around nervously. He tried to speak, but his words came out broken, scattered sounds instead of sentences. People started to glance over, whispering. A group of businessmen smirked from a corner table. "Looks like someone's lost," one of them chuckled quietly. The hostess frowned. "Sir, please." But before she could finish, the man stumbled forward, accidentally knocking over a tray of glasses. They crashed to the floor, splintering into 1,000 pieces. A gasp rippled through the restaurant. Managers came running. The sound of broken glass seemed to echo forever. "Sir, please calm down." One of them snapped. "You're disturbing our guests." The old man tried to speak again, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't hear their voices, couldn't understand their anger. To him, it was all noise and confusion. And then, Jamal appeared. He had been serving water at the far end when he noticed the panic. Without hesitation, he placed his tray down and hurried toward the man. Hey, Jamal whispered softly, touching the man's shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe." The manager frowned. "Jamal, step aside. He's causing a scene." But Jamal didn't move. Instead, he crouched down, eye level with the frightened man, and then, he lifted his hands. And started speaking, not with words, but with his fingers, his palms, his eyes. Sign language. Smooth, graceful, like music in motion. The old man's tearful eyes widened. His trembling stopped. He watched Jamal's hands, his breathing steadying as recognition filled his face. Then, slowly, his own hands began to move too, shaky, but sure. They spoke to each other, in silence. For the first time that day, the old man smiled. A small, fragile smile, like sunlight after rain. The restaurant fell into complete stillness. Forks stopped midair. Conversations froze. The same people who had been laughing now watched in awe as the two men, one rich in heart, one broken by sound, communicated with such grace that words seemed unnecessary. Jamal's lips curved as he signed gently. "Are you okay?" The old man nodded, then signed back. "I'm lost. My son told me to wait here. But I couldn't hear the waiter." Jamal nodded with understanding. "It's okay, sir. You're safe. I'll help you." The man's eyes glistened again, but this time, with gratitude. The manager, embarrassed, stepped forward. "Jamal, what's going on?" Jamal stood slowly, his gaze calm but firm. "He's deaf," he said softly. "He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He just got scared." The manager hesitated. "Still, you should have." But before he could finish, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. "Where is he? My father, where is my father?" Everyone turned. A tall, sharply dressed man entered, eyes burning with panic. His watch gleamed like it cost more than the restaurant itself. His aura screamed power. This was Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings, one of the youngest billionaires in the city. The old man looked up at the voice. His lips moved softly. "Ethan." Ethan rushed forward, wrapping his arms around him. "Dad, you scared me half to death. I told you to wait at home. Why did you come alone?" The old man tried to answer, his hands trembling as he made signs, but Ethan frowned, not understanding. "Dad, please, I can't." Then Jamal stepped closer. "Sir," he said gently, "he's saying he wanted to surprise you. He came here because this is your favorite restaurant. But he got lost and frightened when people started shouting." Ethan blinked in confusion. "You understand him?" "Yes, sir. I learned sign language years ago." Ethan looked at him with something between awe and guilt. I never learned it. My dad tried to teach me when I was young, but I was too busy, building my company. I thought money could buy him everything. But not this." His voice cracked. Jamal looked at the old man again, who signed something softly. His hands were slow but full of meaning. Jamal translated quietly, "He says he's proud of you. Even though you don't understand his silence, he always hears your heart." Ethan's eyes filled instantly. He dropped to his knees beside his father, gripping his hand tightly. "Dad." The restaurant was silent again, not out of discomfort, but respect. A woman at the next table wiped her tears. The businessmen who had laughed earlier now looked down, ashamed. Jamal quietly stepped back, wanting to give them space, but Ethan looked up. "Wait." He stood, turning to Jamal. "What's your name?" Jamal, sir. Ethan nodded slowly, emotion thick in his voice. Jamal, you just gave me something no amount of money ever could. Jamal smiled humbly. Sometimes, sir, the richest people are the ones who can hear what others can't say. Ethan took a deep breath, then whispered, would you stay? Have lunch with us? My father would love that. Jamal hesitated, glancing at his manager, who suddenly looked very small. But before the manager could object, Ethan raised a hand. It's an order, from the owner of this restaurant chain. Everyone gasped. The whispers began again, but this time, in admiration. Ethan pulled out a chair. The old man smiled warmly, gesturing for Jamal to sit. Jamal obeyed, unsure but honored. As they ate, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off how his father and Jamal talked. Their hands moving like poetry, laughter silent yet louder than any sound. When the meal ended, Ethan leaned back and said softly, Jamal, what you did today, it's beyond kindness. You gave my father his voice back. Jamal shook his head gently. No, sir. He never lost it. The world just stopped listening. That line struck everyone at the table. Ethan smiled, his eyes misty. You're right. He turned to his father and signed, clumsy. Broken, but heartfelt, I love you. The old man froze, then smiled through his tears, replying with the same signs, I love you too, son. The entire restaurant clapped. For once, the sound wasn't just noise. It was respect. It was love made audible. Jamal lowered his gaze, humbled. He had simply done what was right, but in doing so, he had changed two lives forever. Ethan stood and faced the crowd. You all saw what kindness looks like. Remember his face, because heroes don't always wear suits or own empires. Sometimes, they wear aprons, and speak through silence. He turned back to Jamal. From today, you're not just a waiter. You're joining my company, as our official inclusion consultant, and friend. The crowd erupted in applause. Jamal could only smile, tears brimming in his eyes. In that golden light, as the father and son embraced again, Jamal realized something, that sometimes, the most powerful language in the world doesn't need words at all. The next morning came quietly, soft sunlight slipping through the curtains of Jamal's tiny apartment. The city outside was waking up, horns, footsteps, voices, but inside his heart there was a stillness he hadn't felt in years. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the small envelope in his hands. It was embossed with gold letters that read, Carter Holdings. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter signed by Ethan Carter himself, offering him a full-time position as inclusion consultant. A position that didn't just mean a better life, it meant a new purpose. Jamal sat for a long time, the letter trembling between his fingers. He had spent years serving people who never saw him, and now someone had seen not just his service but his soul. By noon, a black car waited outside his building. The driver opened the door with a small bow. Mr. Jamal, sir, Mr. Carter is expecting you. The words, Mr. Jamal, felt strange in his ears. For a second, he almost looked behind him, as if the title belonged to someone else. But it didn't. Not today. The car glided through the city streets, past the noise, past the tall glass buildings that once seemed unreachable. When it stopped, Jamal stepped out and stared up. His reflection shimmered across 50 floors of glass. Carter Holdings Tower. Inside, people moved with efficiency, phones in hand, eyes on screens. But when Jamal entered, the receptionist stood quickly and smiled. Good afternoon, Mr. Jamal. Mr. Carter is waiting upstairs. He followed her to the elevator. As the doors closed, he saw his reflection again, not as a waiter, but as a man who had finally been heard. When the elevator opened, Ethan Carter was waiting, his usual corporate confidence replaced by something warmer. Beside him sat his father, the man whose trembling hands had changed everything. Ethan smiled. Jamal, my friend, welcome to your new home. The old man beamed, raising his hands to sign slowly, you brought light into our silence. Jamal smiled back, responding in the same language, and you reminded me that silence can shine. Ethan watched them, his eyes soft. I still can't understand all that, he said with a chuckle, but I'm learning. He lifted his hands clumsily and signed, thank you. Jamal nodded proudly. That's perfect. Ethan led him to a glass office overlooking the city. This is where it begins, he said. I want to start a new division, a program that helps people with disabilities find real work opportunities. We'll train companies to hire, not out of pity, but out of respect. You'll lead it. Jamal blinked, stunned. Ethan, I don't even have a degree. Ethan smiled gently. Maybe not on paper. But you have something rarer, empathy. You understand what it means to listen without sound. That's what we need. The words struck something deep inside Jamal. For years, he had thought of his silence as a shadow, something that kept him unseen. But now, it was the very thing that made him special. He looked out at the skyline, thousands of windows reflecting light. And for the first time in a long time, he whispered, "Yes. I'll do it." Ethan's father signed, "You'll change lives, Jamal. I can see it." Jamal nodded, but deep inside, a quiet ache returned, the kind that time never heals. That night, when he returned home, he took out an old photo from his drawer. A little girl smiled up from it, eyes full of light, hands frozen mid-sign. Maya, his younger sister. The one he'd loved more than anything. The one he couldn't save. The memory hit him like a wave. The smell of smoke. The screaming sirens. The image of her trapped behind a window, signing with trembling fingers, "I love you," before the flames took her away. He had carried that image his whole life. That's why he'd learned sign language so perfectly. That's why he had never walked away when others needed help. That's why he couldn't ignore Ethan's father. He closed his eyes, whispering, "I did it, Maya. I helped someone this time." The next few months passed like a dream. Jamal's program, the Carter Inclusion Initiative, grew faster than anyone imagined. He worked tirelessly, teaching staff basic sign language, organizing workshops, visiting community centers. Every time he saw a deaf child smile as they signed their name proudly, he felt Maya's laughter echoing in his heart. Ethan became not just his boss, but his friend. Often, they'd sit late in the office, sharing coffee and memories. Ethan confessed that growing up rich hadn't meant growing up happy. His father's silence had always felt like a wall. "But you," Ethan said once, "you tore that wall down." Jamal smiled. "Maybe your father and I both needed someone to listen." One evening, Ethan entered Jamal's office, holding 2 tuxedos. "We're hosting a gala," he said, "for the Inclusion Foundation. And you, my friend, are the guest of honor." Jamal laughed nervously. "Guest of honor? Ethan, I'm just..." Ethan interrupted, smiling. "You're the reason this exists." That night, under golden lights and chandeliers, hundreds of people gathered in the grand ballroom. There were business leaders, activists, families, and most importantly, dozens of deaf and differently abled guests, dressed in elegance and pride. As music played softly, Ethan walked onto the stage with his father beside him. He began to speak, his voice steady but emotional. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating success, we're celebrating understanding. And one man reminded me that true strength lies not in wealth, but in compassion." He turned toward Jamal. "Please welcome the man who showed us how silence can speak, Mr. Jamal Carter." Applause thundered through the hall. Jamal walked up slowly, his heart pounding. He had faced many rooms in his life, some full of noise, some full of silence, but never one like this. He took the microphone, his voice shaking. I never thought I'd stand in a place like this," he began. "For a long time, I believed silence was my punishment. I lost my little sister when I was younger. She was deaf. Her name was Maya." The room fell utterly still. "She used to tell me," Jamal continued, tears glistening in his eyes, "that silence wasn't empty, it was full of stories. But after she died, I couldn't bear it anymore. I stopped listening. I stopped believing. Until the day I met a man who couldn't hear but had the loudest heart I'd ever known." He looked toward Ethan's father. "That day, when I used sign language for the first time in years, I felt Maya again. I felt her love. And I realized something: the people we lose don't disappear. They live in every act of kindness we give." The audience sat frozen, many wiping tears. "Maya used to sign something to me every morning," Jamal said softly. "She'd say, 'Kindness doesn't need sound. It just needs hands and heart.'" He lifted his hands and signed the words slowly, beautifully. One by one, the deaf guests began to sign the same phrase. Then others joined, imitating the movements, until the entire hall was filled with hundreds of hands moving in silent unity. No applause. No noise. Just silence, powerful, alive, full of meaning. Jamal's tears fell freely now. Ethan's father stood and walked toward him, taking his hands gently. He signed, "Maya would be proud of you." Jamal gasped softly. How do you know her name?" The old man smiled. "Ethan told me your story. I wanted to learn her name. Because she's part of ours now." Jamal pressed a hand over his heart, unable to speak. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "You changed our family, Jamal. You gave me my father back. You gave us all something priceless, understanding." He turned to the crowd. "From today onward, the foundation will bear her name. The Maya Inclusion Initiative." A wave of emotion rippled through the hall. Jamal covered his mouth, sobbing softly. The room erupted in applause, thunderous, endless applause that felt like heaven breaking open. Ethan's father reached into his pocket and handed Jamal a small silver pendant. When Jamal opened it, he saw an engraving inside. "The heart hears what the ears cannot." He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. The old man smiled. "No, thank you." When the gala ended, Jamal walked outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered on the river like floating stars. He lifted his eyes to the sky, the silver pendant resting against his chest. He whispered softly, "Maya, we did it." And for a moment, as the breeze brushed against his face, he felt something, a warmth, a familiar comfort. The air around him seemed to hum with invisible hands signing back, "I know." He smiled through his tears, standing quietly beneath the stars. The city roared behind him, alive with sound, but within him, there was peace. Silence wasn't his curse anymore. It was his language, his strength, his song. And from that night on, wherever Jamal went, whether in boardrooms, schools, or quiet cafes, people didn't just hear his words. They felt them. Because when kindness speaks, it doesn't need volume. It only needs a heart willing to listen.